Hey nerds! Well, it certainly sounds weird to use that again, but hey, it's been a while since I've actually done a video like this, and considering the fact that I missed several free units, I figured it was probably a good time just before Astram actually completely goes away. How much time do we have left? Oh, 2 days. Well, better late than never, I guess. So without further hullabaloo, let's dive into your newest free unit and actually talk about not only his builds, but what makes him so great. It's time to take a look at Astram. I can't do a dramatic thing here, so let's just get into it. And right from the start, I think you can really tell what makes Astram so special. Not only does he have 172 BST naturally, he has an excellent stat spread. The main draws just from his stats alone are in his speed, his attack, and his defense, all of which are quite hefty, 35, 36, and 36 respectively. But that is not all that he really has to offer. Oh no, he has so much more. Let's take a look at his actual weapon, as well as his base kit. And looking at his base kit, oh boy, there's a lot to digest there, but let's just take a look at his weapon first. So you might be Mercurious about his weapon Mercurious, but let me just say, when it comes to being a physical attacker, you're definitely going to get a big boost out of his weapon. As long as Astram has over 50% health, that means that not only is he going to be getting +4 to every stat, but also any physical attacker that happens to be wielding any sort of weapon that isn't a tome, a staff, or happens to be a dragonstone will also be getting these beneficial effects. But that is not all, my friends. Also included in this deal, of course, is the lovely and amazing Wind Boost. I'm sure all 5 of you Wind Boost aficionados that exist in the universe right now are just going absolutely mad. However, I think a lot of you are probably staring at the B skill slot. Yes, that's right guys, Wrath is now available in the free-to-play sphere, and it is still locked behind 5 stars. You still have to use feathers to get it, but it's still really nice to see a former premium skill being brought over to the free-to-play sphere, and a lot of you will probably get a lot of great usage out of him, and Wrath as well. So let's stop goofing around and actually move on to builds. When it comes to builds though, we're going to be separating these into 3 sections. There's going to be the bronze builds, those are the cheapest, as well as silver builds, which are a bit more intermediate, and then finally gold builds for those who are absolutely insane and really want to show Astram just how potent he can really be. Now with these builds, I want them to be condensed down as much as possible to make it easier for you guys, but also, you can follow along with our template. This will give you the easiest method, hopefully, to actually getting a skill, while also allowing you a better opportunity to know where exactly you're getting them. So, ready? Yeah, well, alright, let's start off with bronze builds. So with the first thing that I'm just going to say right now, with bronze builds, we're not going to try and actively change too much of the kit. We are going to change one thing in particular. His A skill slot is a little so we're going to try and alter that, change it up to something a little bit nicer, maybe something you can make usage out of. So yes, we're going with Fury. The idea here is that we're going to try and mix and match and walk a fine line between not only buffing, but also we kind of want to make usage out of Wrath, you know, because why not? So with this build, it's going to become more of a game of trying to maintain the distance between what amount of health you have for buffing, as well as what amount of health you have to gain access to Wrath. It can be a bit of a tricky puzzle here, and as battles go on, you might find that this build may not be sustainable. When it comes to bronze builds and the C options, there's a lot of versatility. It's really dependent on what you want to put in there to make it work. I'm still going to go down a long list of other options as we go along, but the simplest one that I have here for this attack option is to go with something like Attack Smoke. It's easy to obtain, very useful in keeping him alive, and will allow you to at least debuff any sort of enemies that might, say, try to attack Astram. Now, when it comes to positionals, I'm not going to be one to tell you too much about what you can do here, so I'm just going to leave that up to you guys on what you want to choose. Now, when it comes to specials though, I can safely say that Bonfire is an easy option without having to spend too much. Reminder, bronze builds are mostly around trying to make sure you're not spending too much on this, while also maintaining a full build. So Bonfire, perfectly fine. When it comes to your Sacred Seal slot though, there are a lot of options. The first one that really comes to mind is either Flashing Blade or Heavy Blade, depending on which one you prefer. Mostly because as a unit, Astram is going to be hitting really high levels of both speed and attack, which means that if he happens to be attacking someone who happens to be below those thresholds, he will be getting his special a lot quicker. Personally though, I really enjoy Brazens. The Brazens work wonderfully with this setup, meaning that not only do we happen to get below that HP threshold to activate Wrath, but we also activate the additional stats that come with it in Brazen slots, which really quite phenomenal. And since he's so versatile, you can really pick which one you want. I myself went with attack and defense, but you can go attack speed or attack res depending on which situation you deem worthwhile. Now that's just one build, but there's also a few other builds. Let's go into the second one. This one is more based around the idea of being a buffer. We're going to be trading out that Fury option and instead going with Steady Stance. You can kind of tell where we're going with this build. The idea is to make sure that we can keep Joey Wheeler alive as long as possible, and making sure that we maintain that healthy threshold to make sure those buffs keep coming. So we've included things like Renewal. I mean, we don't need Wrath if we're going to try to maintain his health, right? So yeah. And then from here, we can actually move on to the other skills. In the C skill slot, we're actually going to be changing that out and giving him something more akin to what would be a Marth build in this way. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be stacking buffs. In this case, we're going to go Drive Crazy. And we're going to be doing that in the C skill slot with Drive Speed, which is already pretty easily obtained. And then we're going to go even further with that. In the case of, say, the special skills, Bonfire is still a very easy option. You're already building on his defense, might as well continue to use it. And then of course, when it comes to the Sacred Seal slot, since you're trying to go with a buffing unit, I would suggest putting in something like Drive Attack. This way, you are going to be buffing up not only your characters at the start of turn, but anyone who happens to be around Astrum will also get an additional stat boost while in battle. So now that you have at least an idea of how you can build Astrum, chances are you've probably been using him and realized just how potent he really is. And, well, it's time to celebrate by performing the national dance of his people.
Slap, 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 clap, 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 slap, 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 clap, 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 slap, 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 clap.
It's just so beautiful. All right, I'm zen. Don't worry about it. Let's move on to silver builds. With silver builds, we're going to start introducing characters that are coming from Grails, as well as introducing the concept of replacing his weapon. Yes, some of you have gone insane and probably have done that, but still, that is an option out there. All right, so let's move on to silver builds. These are the more intermediate builds that you can make with a little bit of effort. So I guess it's worth mentioning right now that you technically could start changing out his weapon. If you want him to be a little bit more offensive in how he acts, you can go with certain things like the Slaying Edge Plus or the Wodow Plus. Both of these can be enhanced and refined and are pretty spectacular weapons, the typical bread and butter for a sword unit that doesn't happen to have a preferential weapon such as Astrum. Still though, he can still make excellent usage out of both of these weapons, and should be something to look into in case you really enjoy Astrum as well. So let's continue making those two builds that we've made previously and building upon them with bigger and better skills, shall we? Alright, so let's continue on with that buffing build that we made previously, you know, the one that was using Steady Stance? You don't really have to alter this too much. The biggest thing you can do is instead, say, consider changing out his B and C skill for something else that you might want to use. The first option I can think of is, let's say we want to take our buffer to the next level. Let's make it so he's not only buffing allies, but he's also debuffing the enemy. With that, you can actually remove the B skill, get rid of Renewal, add in, say, Chill Attack, that comes from Garnif, or maybe even Chill Defense from Walhart. These are both Grail units that have it available for you. You're still gonna have to use feathers, but at least there's options. There's also a C skill that's actually quite interesting if you decide to go with it. That of course is Close Guard, that comes from Death Knight, so as long as they're being attacked from a melee distance, they will be taking at least a little less damage depending on the target, so pretty helpful, pretty neat C skill that you can include there, just in case you want to have a bit of a different buff. So let's shift focus back over to our more offensive build, and I'm just going to give you some ideas on how you can evolve that even further if you wanted to. Let's say you don't want to use Fury anymore. Let's say you want to go more player phase, and you want to be able to do more damage when you're actually actively attacking someone with your weapon. Well, there are some interesting methods to go about it, but there are some really good aid skills that you can actually attach to your character. Let's change them out. Let's say instead you want to have more defense when you're attacking, then you can go with something like Sturdy Blow. If you want more speed, Swift Sparrow is always available for you, but that is a little bit harder to use and you are killing off a very beautiful Birdman in the process. As for the build itself, when it comes to, say, your specials, your assist skills, and everything under the sun, I would say that you can pretty much stick to the similar build that we had with the Fury one, although you can change up the specials if you want to make them shorter or faster, like, say, Glimmer instead of, say, Bonfire. Now, we haven't really been touching abilities too heavily. You may have noticed this. Instead, we're trying to aim for the more cheaper alternative. But boy howdy, it's time, folks. We're going gold. Alright, I'm just going to warn you, when it comes to gold tier, this is where things tend to get really expensive. So you're either going to need A, a lot of investment, B, a lot of luck, or C, a mixture of both. So be aware, this is not for the faint of heart. I think the easiest way to summarize one of the gold builds is just 2 words: bonus and doubler. Because it feels like this ability was just made for Astrum in some regard. What this does is that, well, when you have a buff, it happens to add the additional amount of that buff to you during battle. So therefore, since we have +4 to every stat, that means we're going to get an additional +4 to every stat in battle as well. Essentially meaning Astrum, no matter what, has +8 to every stat at the start of the turn as long as he maintains that 50% health. The fun thing about this build is that you can potentially make it as versatile as you want. If you're not using a very potent special skill, one maybe that you want to just make sure you have some sort of survivability in, you could easily change that out to Wrath. It'll allow him to do more damage when he actually activates his special, as long as he's below that health threshold, and, well, it allows you to be a bit more offensive. Or you could go more like me, as I'm doing this right here with Mystic Boost. This allows for a little bit more flexibility, gives more sustain when he actually attacks, and should allow him to at least maintain his health without too much of a hassle. But let's say you want to make sure you actually make great usage out of that speed stat. There is one option for you in case you are an infantry unit that will allow this. Null Follow-Up stops any sort of ability that might stop you from doubling, and it will also stop them from doubling if it happens to be an ability like Quick Riposte. It's really nice, really solid option, but very, very pricey. Speaking of insanely pricey, in our C slot we actually have Time's Pulse. Now, Time's Pulse is an incredibly strong C skill. It allows specials to come down a lot faster as long as they are at max charge at the start of the turn. With Astrum, that means that you can easily gain access to certain abilities at the start of turn, meaning some certain special weapon skills might actually be readily available without too much of a hassle, especially if you happen to be using a certain Sacred Seal. And speaking of a Sacred Seal, let's go into that real quick, shall we? So when it comes to your Sacred Seals, there's a lot that you can actually make usage out of this. I would say, easily enough, Flashing Blade and Heavy Blade are the standouts here, at least allowing you to do a lot more damage, allowing you to activate your specials really quickly. You can go through Aether fairly quickly. Ignis, very, very quickly. These are valuable options for you, which, by the way, when it comes to our specials, I highly suggest using some of the bigger ones. As with Time's Pulse, you can actually make really great advantage out of some other skills. You can easily run Aether and Ignis without too much of a hassle with Flashing or Heavy Blade, but you can also run things like Luna or Bonfire, which were previously 3 charge, and now bring them down to 2, rather easily. This means that with a certain seal or a certain setup, you're going to be either triggering Wrath's effects or just doing a buttload of damage altogether. I've given you a few examples just to give you an idea of what you can do with Astrum, but I really think he is just that flexible that trying to go into every single build would probably last quite a while. We'd probably be here for an hour or so. So instead, I figured we'd just talk about the pros and cons that come with Astrum and how you can play not only with him, but also around him. When it comes to Astrum, he provides quite a lot to your team. Be it a buffer or an offensive powerhouse, he can do both substantially well, and if you actually have a great enough kit, he can do that simultaneously. To give you an example of how potent, or at least how powerful of a unit he can be, he matches stat-wise with his blade, BST of about 175 with his sword attached to him. That means that he's about the level of a Christmas Lissa when it comes to the amount of stats that he has allowed to him. That gives you a good idea of just how potent he can be. There's also, of course, the elephant in the room. I'm talking about Wrath. Now, Wrath is available for free and should be available for free from Grails later on in November. And that means that we're going to have a lot more flexibility. In exchange for 20,000 feathers, having Wrath available to other units is definitely a godsend, and is definitely meaning that he's going to be murdered a lot. Now it's time to move on to the cons, or playing around Astrum. So, when it comes to Astrum, there are a few key things that you can aim for when dealing with him. The most noticeable chink in his armor, of course, is resistance, which in certain game modes will be problematic, and any tome unit worth their salt should be able to at least either outright kill him or knock him below his HP threshold. And that brings us to the next con, and the easiest way to play around him is to make sure that you actually reduce his health enough, because once he gets below 50% health, he will lose access to his buffs. The other easy option here is just to panic him. Be it ploy, smoke, or sudden, a panic will absolutely destroy a lot of what Astrum's working towards. And since all of his teammates seem to be around in the same area, you can easily debuff them as well, meaning that a lot of his buffs that he would be throwing out will now become penalties, and you can easily mop up any sort of group that happens to have it. All in all though, I would say Astrum is a strong character that you can really make great usage out of. He will be a fantastic character if you decide to build him, or if you want to fodder off that wrath to someone who might necessarily need it more, you can do that too. Probably one of the best GHBs we've had since Kronia, which honestly wasn't that long ago now that I think about it. So I guess we should probably give him a final ranking and wrap this all up, shall we? When it comes to Astrum as a pure character, he has a lot to offer. Solid stat lineup, a great weapon that only he can use, and that makes him a potent buffer, as well as a force to be reckoned with in the battlefield. When it comes to his skills as well, I will say that Wrath is an ability that a lot of people have been looking for. Granted, it's become a little bit easier to get to it as time has gone on, but it's still really nice to see it in the free-to-play sphere. So I would say that as a fodder unit, he will definitely be sought after when it comes to Wrath. So I would say that's a must-have come November. Alrighty folks, that's about it for me tonight. I know that this isn't exactly the best video I've put out, but it's been a little while. I'm really rusty and trying to get back into it, but if you really enjoyed what you watch here, feel free to leave a like, check out the rest on my channel, maybe come and hang out on Twitter. I would love to see your builds of not only Astrum, but other characters, and maybe go check out the rest of everything that we have going on here, guys. It's been a lot of fun. It's great to be back, and I love you guys very much. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!